In 2015, astrophysicists Duncan Lorimer and Maura McLaughlin stumbled upon a strangely flickering star. Its radiation pulsed so brightly, they were unable to match it to any known object in the universe. As the story made the headlines, scientists around the world were baffled. Then, astronomers at the Green Bank telescope confirmed that these light signals were emanating from a star in the Cygnus constellation, 1,200 light-years away. This fluctuating star was catalogued KIC 8462852 and named Tabby Star in honor of Tabitha Suzanne Boyajian, the first astronomer who wrote about it.
Amongst the 100,000 stars that was dipping its light, or flux as they call it, periodically. Now this is something which happens if a planet moves in front of a star. You get a very slight dip in the amount of light that's reaching us. In this case, the dips were anything up to 22%. Now, if I can put this into perspective, if, let's say, Jupiter, the largest planet in our solar system, crosses in front of the Sun, if you were looking at it from afar, it would dip the light only about 1%. So something that was dipping the light anything up to 22% is going to be huge, massive, something that is totally different, something that we've not encountered before in astronomy. So what was going on?
Since 2015, the answer to this question has garnered the attention of astronomers, scientists, and space enthusiasts alike, and a myriad of explanations have been offered, but none have been conclusive. What is really odd about this mystery is that, uncharacteristically, even the most staunch scientists have not discounted a popular hypothesis that the expansive object interrupting Tabby Star's brightness could be built by an advanced spacefaring civilization. Astoundingly, the BBC have even released a documentary advocating this theory. Could it really be true?
Then in 2016, a new burst was detected. The distinctive pulse of radio waves released as the neutron stars collided and were destroyed, followed by nothing. Silence.
The BBC have shown for the first time a documentary not just about this star, but the fact that it almost certainly has an ET vessel, alien megastructure around it. We're not just talking about bacteria, we are talking about advanced civilizations, thousands of years more advanced than us down here on Earth. The question comes is that if there really is a structure around this star, how does it affect us down here? I mean, is it possible that these aliens have been in touch with us in some way, in the recent past, or perhaps even in the distant past? And the question comes down to communication. The star is approximately 1,300 light years from our solar system, which means that when we're looking towards it, anything we see happened 1,300 years ago. So that's around 700 AD. You know, the Maya civilization was still in full flight. When they look at us, of course, they are also looking at that same time frame, around 700 AD.
Linda Moulton Howe's theory suggests that the Mayan civilization was created in a hybridized program and then simply disappeared, possibly off-planet. Oddly enough, this connects to the same time frame with the Tabby star. Could there be an ancient civilization that once lived on Earth, trying to connect with us?
I will be sought out by some people who have worked for the CIA, NSA, DIA. There was a man who had said that he had worked for the Central Intelligence Agency, and he said that was the Mayan civilization created in a hybridized program that there was a collaboration teaching that all of the mathematical skills from history, then in 850 AD, it wasn't drought. It wasn't human war. This man said to me, for reasons unknown, the Ebens came in 850 AD, and they took the majority of their hybridized Mayans in a large craft and left Earth.
Could the Mayan disappearance and the Tabby star anomaly be linked? Or could this mystery in the sky actually have a more ancient connection? An ancient connection that some believe taps into the codes of our planet.
Those astronomers, they also said that these dips in the light could also be used to broadcast information, whether this information be binary, whether it be prime numbers, or some other form of attention-seeking information which a species like ourselves, humanity, could recognise as intelligent, as universal information. The work that I'm carrying out suggests that there is intelligence in the broadcasts, and that it may well be that it is giving us not just prime numbers or binary, but very specific mathematical formula. What I have determined is that there are certain cycles associated with the Kepler data. They are all interlinked, and they all reflect certain key numbers. All of them are multiples of 11. Now, this may be just a very simple piece of information, but what's so interesting is that we find that this is associated with the most complex mathematical formula that we have down here on Earth. For instance, Pascal's triangle is made up of multiples of 11. It's like a pyramid of numbers, the first number being 1, the second number being 11, the third number being 121, the fourth number being 1331, 11 squared, 11 cubed, etc., etc. These are exactly the same numbers that are being broadcast from the KIC star right at this moment. This is where it gets weird, because the Great Pyramid is obviously one of the greatest enigmas of the ancient world. Certain researchers, certain colleagues have found within it certain key numbers that keep cropping up again and again. And those numbers are the exact numbers that are being broadcast by this star, KIC 8462852. Is this a coincidence? The Great Pyramid and its two neighbours are aligned to exactly the same constellation as where this star is, which is Cygnus.
And yet, just 1,000 miles northeast, another megalithic site that is much older also points to the Cygnus constellation. In fact, it's the largest and oldest megalithic site on Earth, Göbekli Tepe.
Is it also a coincidence that the oldest complex of stone monuments in the world at Göbekli Tepe in southeast Turkey is also aligned to the constellation of Cygnus? Is it also a coincidence that in some of the oldest cave art around the world we find evidence of this same constellation represented by celestial birds, by birdmen, birds on poles that are pointed and directed towards this constellation?
I wish we could get into the minds and into the heads of the people who made these sites all over the world in megalithic structures, that they are all concerned with lining themselves up to the rising point of the sun at certain times of the year. They're telling us something about our connection to the cosmos and our place on Earth.
Could Göbekli Tepe, the oldest megalithic structure on the planet, be revealing a code that would connect us not only to this anomaly in the sky, but also to other ancient sites around the world? Translated into English, Göbekli Tepe means pot-bellied hill. In 1994, Klaus Schmidt, an archaeologist from Germany, began digging into this unnatural-looking bluff. A few feet below the surface, he discovered stone ruins. Further investigation revealed that this ancient formation in southern Turkey was 7,000 years older than Stonehenge, throwing into question much of what has been written in the history books. Klaus Schmidt dedicated his life's work to uncovering what might lie below the surface and continued to excavate until he, mysteriously, died in 2014. 95% of the ruins are still buried, and the true purpose of Göbekli Tepe and its relationship to the galaxy is still an unsolved mystery.
Most archaeologists believe the site is about 13,000 years old, and they believe it existed for a couple of thousand years, and then it was deliberately buried. Now, as far as I'm concerned, it could date back much further than that, because there is evidence in Turkey that humans like us existed millions of years ago.
Greg Braden points out that more evidence is being uncovered, pushing back the date of antiquity. Could Göbekli Tepe be even older?
One of the consequences of global warming is that the ice on the poles has receded tremendously, including Antarctica. And the thickness of the ice, as it is reduced, allows greater visibility from Earth-penetrating radar, so we can see what's underneath the ice. But one of the surprises is that the satellite images are sending back now what appear to be large-scale, complex archaeological sites. So they're not small hunting villages and pit houses. These look like advanced technological civilizations that we're seeing underneath the ice. So as a scientist, I have to say one of two things happened. Either someone built these complex structures under the ice after it already formed, which is less likely, and the more likely scenario is that the structures existed and then the ice covered them. Right now, civilization, the date is being pushed back to 13,500 years. The last ice age ended 12,000 years ago. The historic context of civilizations going back 50, 60, 70,000 years along these 5,000 year cycles shows up in the mythology. Maybe the mythology is based on much more fact than we've been led to believe in the past, or we've been willing to embrace in the past.
If indeed it could be older than mainstream scientists believe, then what could be its purpose?
Göbekli Tepe is the oldest stone circle complex in the world. If you can imagine Stonehenge in England and transpose it onto the top of a mountaintop in southeast Turkey, and then multiply it by at least 20 times, and then cover the stones with beautiful carvings of animals and representations of abstract humans, and give them T-shaped tops, because that's what the stones have there. This is what Göbekli is. It was constructed at the very end of the last ice age, around 9,500 BC, and was in use for a period of around 1,500 years before it was abandoned about 8,000 BC. What's so interesting is that the oldest and the most accomplished of technologically advanced stone enclosures, and that alone gives us evidence of possibly a lost civilization. The fact is that Göbekli Tepe is in northern Mesopotamia. The area around Urfa and Haran and Göbekli Tepe. This is clearly the cradle of civilization. This is where the Anunnaki had their power base.
I am on a trip with geologist Robert Schock, who had his PhD in Yale University, and we are standing down inside of the excavation at Göbekli Tepe, surrounded by these 19-foot tall limestone pillars, each weighed up to 15 tons. And they're in rings. And in that process of standing there and talking about this is the most baffling place. It doesn't feel like anything that humans can understand. Robert Schoch said, I've been staring at these T structures and thinking about the old past and what could this have been built for? And he said, all of these limestone pillars have T tops. And he said, it reminds me of tuning forks. And he said, Linda, when you stand up at the top of the hill and you realize that Göbekli Tepe was built in a bowl, you're always looking down at the top of these big T-pillars unless you climb down into, and then you're among them. And he said, what if this whole place was built to resonate with certain frequencies by something above, resonating frequencies on big pillars put in rings?
When you look at Göbekli Tepe and you see all of the constructions of the inscriptions of all of the animals of the earth on these giant pillars, it's always been interesting to me that perhaps what these things were a way of recording a standing wave pattern of a certain kind of a life form. For instance, a crocodile exists on a different standing wave pattern than a crane, than an elephant, than a monkey. And perhaps what they were trying to do was, out of a state of preservation, trying to preserve these things. They were trying to preserve stones that actually had those frequencies recorded into them.
Could Göbekli Tepe have been an ancient portal constructed to communicate with gods in faraway galaxies? Is it possible that Tabby Star could be a signal for humans to pay attention to this gateway?
There is, for example, evidence of very clear, very precise astronomy at Göbekli Tepe. It contains, amongst other things, the world's first perfectly north-south aligned building. You can't do that without astronomy. There are alignments to specific star groups and specific moments of the year. It's a highly evolved site.
Shamanic cultures right the way across the Eurasian continent saw the northern celestial pole as the point of exit from the physical world and the point of entry into the sky world. And it was seen as a whole, quite literally a whole, connecting the different universes, the middle world to the upper world. It would seem as if this stone is a signboard showing that journey and the actual course, the route that you would take to reach the sky world. I believe that one of the indicators to our earliest ancestors of a place of great power was the appearance of mysterious lights. It's known that a lot of strange light phenomena is seen in those very mountains where Göbekli Tepe is sighted. We call them UFOs today, but these type of phenomena have been occurring for many, many thousands of years, arguably since the beginning. I think that our ancestors would have seen these as important signs that here were places where you could establish points of contact, portals if you like, with the other world, and that by building your monuments here, that link with the stars would be stronger. The downloads of information that create civilization would be stronger. Pillar 43 at Göbekli Tepe is a signboard for the shaman who would be achieving altered states of consciousness within the enclosures and then journeying in an astral form to the upper world.
Perhaps a deeper understanding of the relationship of these ancient monuments to Tabby Star and other galaxies is the key to understanding who built them and why.
You know, I've not examined aerial views of Göbekli Tepe, but the fact that some people, some researchers are equating that with a star map that depicts our relationship would be a perfect match for not only the Egyptian culture, but for what we've discovered in the construction of the pyramids themselves and the fact that this harmonic relationship exists between this star And it could very well be that what that cosmology was meant to encapsulate and describe is this idea that our star is interacting harmonically with these other stellar bodies. And it could be that this ancient extraterrestrial race that came to visit here not only understood that, but are following that as a sort of harmonic map around the universe.
If it is indeed true that Göbekli Tepe is a gateway to other galaxies, then perhaps somehow its architects knew a global catastrophe was imminent and buried this ancient technology to protect it.
As the excavations continued, a number of surprising things began to become clear. First off, this pot-bellied hill and this whole site had not been covered up by natural sedimentation. After being in use for about 1,000 years, it was deliberately buried by whoever was involved with it. This was not some invading army who came in and smashed it up. This was in a kind of preservation. You must envisage teams of hundreds of people with sort of buckets filled with stone and rubble, and they're coming and they're pouring it in on top of the existing stone circles. And they just keep on pouring until every stone circle is covered.
Could the knowledge that has been covered up preserved the mythology from almost every ancient culture?
Göbekli Tepe is a kind of it's like a potpourri of cultures. You see a lot of Sumerian influence. There's a lot of Egyptian symbolism in Göbekli Tepe as well. There's Hindu influence in there as well, Japanese. And the fact is, this is where you start getting into this grey area. Where does it come from? Was there a world's book, a central point where everybody got their ideas from? It seems to me that Göbekli Tepe is almost like a microcosm of so many cultures around the world that supposedly never shared information with each other. And now we begin to realize actually they got around much more than we gave them credit for.
Could the big secret at Göbekli Tepe be the connection of every culture from around the world? And could it have been discovered at the right time to reveal information? There are many who believe uncovering the answers to these questions will transform how we understand ourselves.
I would be lying if I said I knew what was exactly buried at Göbekli Tepe, but I think what you can do is draw a lot of similarities and parallels to some of these other megalithic sites and get some pretty decent scientific insight into what they were trying to accomplish. And what it looks like they were trying to accomplish is the preservation of this scientific knowledge, maybe at a time when there was just such global upheaval that the only way to preserve it was to bury it. Could very well be why they purposely buried the entire site. You're going to construct a megalithic site of that kind of grandeur and scale and put that kind of effort into it, and then you're going to turn around and just bury it. Why would any society do that?
But whoever built Göbekli Tepe, the fact that they buried that very important 30 acres of these rings of all of these limestone columns meant somebody, something knew that something potentially destructive to the whole planet, and they didn't want Göbekli Tepe destroyed. But Göbekli Tepe survived until the 1990s.
Although Göbekli Tepe's discovery in 1990 was groundbreaking, research has been problematic given the dangerous upheaval in the area and the knowledge that still stays buried. But perhaps the discovery of the Tabby star has become a beacon for knowledge still preserved at Göbekli Tepe, pointing us in a direction to uncover some human truths.
I think it is our responsibility to preserve those records that are being destroyed in this cradle of civilization, in the Tigris-Euphrates, in Iraq, in Syria, in Turkey, because they are very intentionally being destroyed in some cases to wipe out the memory of these past civilizations for a number of reasons. Once they're gone forever. And I think it's very sad to see what's happening, and I think it's a wake-up call. We've taken for granted for so long the fact that these records are here and that they exist. We never really considered that they could be destroyed so easily.
If they actually got the funding and got the effort and they excavated the rest of that 95% of that site, I'm pretty sure what it's going to do is answer a whole lot of mysteries about these other megalithic sites. And the reason why I say that is because here's a site that's completely preserved, as far as we know. It may be an actual perfect construction of the science that they were trying to save. And if that ends up being the case, then I think what you'll see is a resurgence all through humanity and a real effort to try to rediscover what it was that we're now missing, that we are a species living with amnesia of what this science was. And it's simply because we've had such a turbulent history as a species, war after cataclysm after cataclysm, the Library of Alexandria being burned. All of those things mean that we've lost more knowledge maybe than we even possess right now. And a lot of that knowledge, when you really begin to study these ancient sites, can be regained. And I'm hoping that's what takes place with Göbekli Tepe. We've got a lot of mysterious cities built out of stone around the world, but that kind of structure, and only 5% of it has been excavated, means that below that is such a massive amount to be found.
I think Göbekli Tepe has many more secrets to reveal. The astronomy of the site is something that a number of researchers are beginning to look into, and I think that's going to be one of the keys to help us understand what was going on at Göbekli Tepe. But there's nothing to beat plain old-fashioned excavation, and that site needs to be dug up. I feel that Göbekli Tepe is potentially so important for unraveling the origins of our present civilizations that we really need to expose the whole site and understand absolutely what's going on there. It may change many things about how we view ourselves and our past.
There's something more beyond that, that some part of us comes from the stars themselves, and that at the point of incarnation, that something, we call it the soul or the spirit, embodies within flesh and blood and exists, and that this gives us this connection to the stars, that the soul or spirit actually comes from an extraterrestrial or a starry source.
What else lies buried inside the pot-bellied grounds at Göbekli Tepe? Are there more secrets about the true origins of mankind to be unearthed? Are we being prompted by the communication with Tabby Star to dig deeper and connect with these ancient sites? Could there be some kind of code that interlocks celestial locations with monuments on Earth? Would it be possible Göbekli Tepe could be the ultimate smoking gun when it comes to connecting these ancient monuments across the globe and the truth on why they exist? And could it reveal a message that helps us understand our current civilization and how to continue humanity on this planet? Researchers continue to gather data, but the answer may still lie buried beneath the dirt. As the unraveling of these mysteries continue, some interesting evidence begins to emerge from some unusual locations. One such place has one of the largest stones carved by human hands at 1,650 tons.
Baalbek is one of the big enigmas of which there is very little answers. We're talking about a huge complex.
Around the Temple of Jupiter, there used to be 54 columns. 54, what's the significance of that?
Could this number sequence help reveal a code at Baalbek? And is it possible it could be more evidence of an ancient message? Stay tuned for the next season of Ancient Civilizations, where we dive deeper to unravel the code of humanity.